Some days I feel a little blah, and that's probably a sign that I could use an acupuncture treatment myself, but it's also a sign that the neurotransmitters in our brain aren't functioning properly. If I just turn to supplementation, in essence popping pills, even if they're natural supplements, then all I'm really doing is creating more toxicity in my body. What do you know about the chemicals that we rely on to feel good and to keep our brain functioning? I was in a discussion yesterday and had some new insight I wanted to share with you. We were specifically talking about serotonin, but you can't really talk about serotonin without also considering the other brain chemicals, which we're going to get to as we move along here. Just for a quick second, I'm Dr. Gayla Gorman. I'm a licensed acupuncturist, naturopath, and author of a number of books. I'm going to make a case for acupuncture here, but you don't necessarily need to come find me. There are many acupuncturists that you could turn to that could help you if seeing me isn't really an option. So back to the serotonin discussion. Serotonin is the chemical that just generally makes us feel good, have that sense of well-being and satisfaction. I will admit that I struggle with feeling really satisfied, and it's not really depression. I don't feel depressed. I just feel like I'm always wanting something more. Some days I feel a little blah, and that's probably a sign that I could use an acupuncture treatment myself, but it's also a sign that the neurotransmitters in our brain aren't functioning properly, because I know my hormones are regulated. That's not the issue. If I just turn to supplementation, in essence popping pills, even if they're natural supplements, then all I'm really doing is creating more toxicity in my body. Because if my body has enough of the chemical and it's not getting through, then pushing more of the chemical into my body is doing nothing more than creating more toxicity in my liver and other organs, and causing a tremendous burden on my system of elimination. Serotonin, for example, all the chemicals are dependent on these connections, and it's the neurotransmitters that help to regulate the connections and sort of keep everything functioning properly. Serotonin in particular allows you to sort of maintain that general feeling of well-being, but in order to keep it circulating and keep it regulating in your body, your brain needs to be functioning properly. Another one of the chemicals in your brain that you may be more familiar with is dopamine. Dopamine tends to be that rush and excitement, and we call it newness drug. My husband is a psychotherapist, and he specializes in helping people with addiction and people who are dealing with trauma. I grew up in a home with an alcoholic father, so we have a heart for anybody who's dealing with that, either personally or in their family. But addicts tend to have trained their brain to rely on the dopamine rush, and that's only accessible with a new experience typically. That's why addicts tend to increase their drug of choice. That could be a behavior or a substance, whatever it is. They tend to increase whatever it is they're doing because they are not getting the dopamine rush. But no amount of increasing it's going to give them the dopamine rush, because the dopamine rush is related to the newness and the novelty and the excitement related to that. So if you're in this sort of cycle, regardless of what it is that it's related to, you've got to retrain your brain to function well on a normal amount of dopamine. And that can take a little while. Fortunately, we have neuroplasticity, which means that our brains will rewire themselves and heal over time with the change process that you may have heard me talk about. Those are different videos, so I'm not going to go into that today. But the change process requires certain things to convince your body, basically, that you're serious about making the change. Moving on, oxytocin is another brain chemical in your body. Oxytocin is the chemical that's associated with feeling loved and accepted. That human connection typically is where we get our oxytocin from, but it can also come from a pet. People who are pet people really learn to rely on that unconditional love that they get from a pet. It's really powerful. My beloved pets are gone now, but I haven't replaced them in part because I just don't think any new pet could hold a candle to them because they were so wonderful and such great loves in my life. One of the reasons why we go back to our families, as traumatic as it might be for us, is because we've been conditioned to think that that's where our oxytocin is going to come from. I just encourage you to develop your own ways to experience oxytocin on a regular basis and not have to rely on it necessarily from humans that we can't control. The last major brain chemical is endorphins. A lot of us are familiar with endorphins because endorphins are what we get when we exercise, for example. I'm not getting a huge endorphin rush walking on the beach here. This is more of a serotonin sort of general well-being infusion today. But when you get your heart rate pumping and you get all that extra adrenaline pumping through your system, that's an endorphin rush. And that's another rush that we don't want to learn to rely on because we train our brain that that's the only way we feel good, is when we've got that rush of endorphins. When you sustain that kind of rush, it does a lot of damage in your system. Those are the four main brain chemicals, and it might seem like you just want to supplement with things that are feeling a little low. The problem is that supplementation doesn't necessarily work because the problem most likely is that your neurotransmitters are not making all the connections. So you've got plenty of any of these chemicals in your body, but they're not making it from one receptor to another because the neurotransmitters are required to get it there. That's where acupuncture comes in. So acupuncture is fantastic to help regulate all these systems in your body. They get all your nerves and energy channels, if you will, functioning and moving, regulate all those processes in your body, and just generally improve your sense of well-being, because all that you naturally have already been doing to feel better and to take care of yourself are now available to you. If you haven't experienced acupuncture, I encourage you to look for somebody locally that you could turn to. There are ways to stimulate some points yourself. I'll talk about that in other videos. I use additional processes to help pour more, we call it qi. Qi is basically the energy that's running through your body. It's spelled Qi. We pour some extra benevolent qi into your channels with the way I practice. And that just helps to give a little extra juice to bust through the blockage. Imagine that there was a stream and a lot of debris fell over the fall and winter, and now the spring rains are coming, and all this water is building up because the stream is blocked with all these twigs and debris. So we push some extra benevolent chi into those channels to help clear those blocks. And everything is interconnected. So once you clear one or two or a few blocks, then everything starts to flow better. Have you experienced acupuncture? If not, then go ahead and reach out to us. You can find me at drgala.com. Reach out to us and we can see if we can help you find somebody where you are. I am in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and so if you find yourself heading this way, you might want to see what it would take to come in to the clinic for a visit. Thanks for joining us, and we appreciate having you with us on this journey.